So before we get into this video, I want to give you a little FYI. I am indeed under the weather. I was just going to take today off, but I don't know. There's something weird in my head where I feel like if I take a day off, like that's not good. So here I am. My voice is going to sound weird, nasally. I'll probably cough a few times. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. Let's hit 500,000 before my birthday in July. You have plenty of time, but let's get into this story because this is something that Nintendo is probably seething right now, just with pure anger. Because if you know one thing about this company, and there's a lot of things to know, but if you know one thing about them, you would of course know they don't like emulation of any sort. We've talked about it a million times with the Nintendo Switch emulators and stuff like that. They'll do everything they can in order to take these emulators down. But it doesn't just deal with their modern system, because if it did, I think people would be a lot more understanding about it. But this is about their whole catalog, everything from the NES to the present day. They do not like emulators for, and that's a topic in and of itself. We've touched on it several times on this channel, but there is a new emulator that is out there that is now readily available on the Apple storefront called Delta. And Nintendo is pissed about this because it used to be with an iPhone, you would have to sideload everything on there. Like, you couldn't just go to the App Store and download an application that's an emulator and then put your ROMs on it. No, you had to sideload it. It was definitely a lot more work. But now you can go to the Apple App Store on your phone, download the Delta emulator, and you have access to a plethora of systems: NES, N64, Nintendo DS, all right there at your fingertips. And then you simply download a ROM, because that's not hard to do, and you're playing these games on your iPhone or your iPad. Now, Android has had this sort of stuff for a while, but Apple is definitely a much more controlled thing. Recently, Apple sort of made an announcement that there was going to be policy changes when it came to their applications, and emulators was one of the thing. Now, some emulators have actually gone up on the Apple Store and then been removed within like a few hours, but this one seems to be holding rather steady, at least for now, because like I said, Nintendo is not going to be happy about this. They're going to be pissed off, because in their mind, the Nintendo Switch Online stuff is the substitute for emulators. Oh, well, you could play these games via Nintendo Switch Online if you get the expansion pack to play N64 stuff, even though you can't get DS stuff. Like, they don't care. They don't care that you can't give them money. It's in their mind, it's considered stealing, which that's a huge gray area. I never understand why people just automatically assume, well, if you get a DS emulator, you're pirating stuff. And it's like, well, you can't give Nintendo money for these. Like, you could at one time. Some of these games were on the Wii U. Now, of course, you have to talk about performance of this emulator, and it seems to be performing like rather well. And this is something that's starting to get a lot more eyes on it because of the accessibility. A lot of people have Apple products. I once had an iPhone. I went back to Android. I'm not an Apple person. And let me just, as a little aside here, if you're a lady watching this video and you're one of those who makes like a joke, like, oh, there's a green bubble, like, nobody likes you. Nobody likes you. Like, that's the most unattractive thing to say to someone, because all it does is perpetuate that you are a materialistic person. Like, I don't even care if it's a joke. Like, it's so annoying. It's like, yes, I use an Android phone. You probably drive a freaking 2002 Honda Accord that has a check engine light on it, but you're gonna try and, say something about me because I have an Android phone. Get off your high horse. Anyways, the accessibility of this is definitely very attractive for a lot of people. And like I said, the performance of it looks to be pretty good. It seems like it's running a vast majority of games. I've shown some gameplay footage here of various games. I'll actually link the channel that I'm using in the description box down below. Go show them some love. Tell them RGT sent you. But we're seeing DS stuff. We're seeing Game Boy Advance when it comes to Pokemon games, which, once again, the Pokemon company's not going to be happy about that. N64 seems pretty solid. There's now this other video that's making its rounds on the internet showing someone using the Apple Vision to essentially like create like a retro gaming room and playing these games. Now, to me, that's ridiculous. Like, I would just, like, I don't need a fictitious room. I'll just play them in an actual room on an emulator on a PC or one of my many devices that I have. But the thing about this is, you know, there's so many companies out there that make these, you know, knockoff handhelds. A lot of stuff comes out of China where it's preloaded with stuff. And, like, that's because in China, there aren't really copyright laws like there are here. But when you're talking about Apple, I can't imagine Nintendo's gonna take this like lying down. And I know what a lot of people are gonna say. Well, who wants to play a game on their phone? Because, you know, unless it's like a turn-based strategy game or something like that, you don't get that same precision on a phone than you do with a controller. But that's the thing. Like, where have you been? They have controllers for your phone that you can attach and basically make it, they're not even expensive. I'm talking like $20, less than what one of these retro games would cost them to buy a physical copy of it, pending they have the system already. Like, it's definitely a lot easier for people to do this sort of stuff. And it seems like Apple is kind of standing on business with this. Like, they're essentially allowing emulators to be played on their devices, whether it's an iPhone or you know, one of their Mac products or the tablets that they have. I forget what they're, the iPad. Jesus Christ. I told you, my brain is kind of in a fog today. So what is Nintendo going to do? Does anyone honestly think that Nintendo isn't going to fight this? Does anyone honestly think that Nintendo is not going to go after Apple? And could Apple be the company that puts Nintendo in their place and is like, hey, bro, like, you can't do this sort of stuff, you know? It's okay for an emulator to exist. It's what people do with the emulator, because there are a million games out, well, not a million, but there are literally hundreds of games out there that run on an NES or a Game Boy, you know, homebrew games that people can support the developers that make these homebrew games, buy, you know, a copy of it on Steam or get a copy of it on the NES, and then they get access to that ROM. And the company themselves gives them access to the ROM for paying the money, and then they play that ROM on the emulator, because the emulator itself is not illegal. It's not illegal. And I think this is going to set a very interesting precedent with this situation and really just going forward with emulators, because the more people try to test Nintendo on this, you know, are they going to want to waste money? Like, can you really go up against Apple of all companies? Because if one company can put you in your place and, you know, stop you from being so anal about your old ROMs and your old games that a lot of them you don't give people access to any other way besides emulation, or the third-party market, which is so oversaturated with high prices that nobody wants to pay, like, I think this is going to be very interesting. I await Nintendo's response, and I hope that some shareholders at this upcoming Nintendo business meeting, I hope they ask about it. Like ask Nintendo, like, what do you think about this emulator? You know, that's on the Delta emulator, that's on the Apple App Store, that people could just play these old games now via this emulator. Like, why aren't you doing anything about it? Like, I want to see the fallout from this situation, but all I know is Nintendo is pissed, and I think it's kind of funny because they're just so crazy about stuff like this. But like I said, I do not own an Apple device anymore, so I haven't checked out this emulator, but everything I've seen from it looks pretty good. Like, I did notice in the weird video where the dude's like sitting in a room, that Mario Kart 64, the screen was not displayed right as far as like the when you're in that first level and like you go under the tunnel and there's a screen that's up there. That's one of the things that you actually look for with emulation devices, to kind of see how it handles that. It didn't handle it very well, but honestly, for like 9 out of 10 people, nobody's gonna care about that. Nobody's going to care about that. I'm not a phone game player, but I understand there are a lot of people out there. And if you already have one of these beefy phones, like, I don't know, why not try to get the most out of it? Let me know in the comment section down below, though. Have you checked out the Delta app emulator and what your thoughts on it are, what games you're playing on it? And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. I have been fighting back a cough this entire time. The video probably sucks, honestly, as far as like visual quality is concerned, because I don't know what the hell to put up. I'll try to make it look somewhat decent. I'm not being on camera right now. Hit that subscribe button if you're new. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. I don't know why I said episode. This is an episodic show. Later.